Welcome, YouTube family, and welcome to another edition of the Kevin Strong Show. And in this video, we're going to talk about, are we becoming a nation of renters? I'm specifically going to spend most of my time talking about the Seattle market and that the housing prices, even though they're starting to come down, they're just out of reach for the average person. And most people are basically reserving to the fact that they're just going to have to rent indefinitely. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Please feel free to extract from this information, even though specifically this video is going to be talking about the Seattle renting market and the Seattle housing market. This applies to a lot of large metropolitan cities across the country. I was actually, guys, I was thinking about doing a different background. Just down the street, there's a lake down the street from my house. I was thinking about, getting a little close to the lake. And don't worry, despite the stereotypes, if I fall in, don't worry, I know how to swim. So you don't have to worry about it. The show will go on. And you don't have to worry about my jerry curl getting wet. So without further ado, let's get into this. If you're liking this kind of content, please do me the honor right now of smashing that like button, sharing the video, and I also welcome comments, and I'll do my best to respond in a timely fashion. So for those of you who live in the greater Seattle area, you know how much home prices have gone up actually since 2012. I just did a video on that last week, and rent has just gone up astronomically within the last 24 months since the healthcare crisis basically came on the scene around March of 2020. I was on record over a year ago saying whenever these moratoriums were going to expire, landlords were going to just lash out to try to recuperate months and in some cases years of lost income as a result of not only not being able to collect rent, but not being able to evict someone for failure to pay rent and replace that with a paying tenant. So I'm not making a debate on one side or the other, but once again, capitalism always fills a void. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into this article here. And as you can see here, the title of this article is called "In Seattle's Overpriced Housing Market, Some Opt to Rent Indefinitely." When it comes to dollars and cents, a $3,000 rent can be easier to swallow than a $5,000 mortgage. I think this is ultimately going to be something that's going to plague large metropolitan cities like this. I don't think inflation is going away anytime soon. And even if it moderates and pulls down in 2023 or beyond, it still is not going to come down to the point where people's wages are keeping up with inflation, because quite frankly, wages have not kept up with inflation for decades. So this is going to be a growing problem for the foreseeable future. Let's go ahead and dive into this article. Homeownership is the American dream. Nearly 3/4 of Americans see it as the highest mark of prosperity in their lives. Ownership provides autonomy. A long-term fixed monthly mortgage provides stability that renting likely won't. And it builds equity and wealth. But at what point does the dream become impractically expensive? The median rent for one bedroom in Seattle is $1,700. Two bedrooms is $2,000. Okay. So for a medium priced $860,000 home in Seattle, to afford that, the buyer would likely owe more than $5,500 each month. That is crazy. So obviously you see the cost benefit analysis to renting comparing to owning a home in an area like Seattle. Conversely, recently, within the last 30 days, rents are starting to come down a little bit in the greater Seattle area. I believe that will continue throughout the remainder of this year and in 2023. But once again, even if rent rates come down, will they come down at an affordable level when you're still dealing with all these other ancillary things that eat away at your disposable income via inflation? Rent, gas, utilities. You know where I'm going with this. Okay, so for some Seattle renters, the math doesn't add up. Despite the advantages of home ownership, the financial leap can seem illogical, even if they likely could pull the money together and buy. So I think this is a really, really telling story about the plight of people who want home ownership, but they're just priced out. And like I said, this thing is going to go on for quite some time. For the idea of moving to a single family residential neighborhood surrounded by other houses is the exact opposite of diverse living, says Proctor. You have to go pretty far to buy a house for $700,000 or $800,000. It's just a number on some level, but it's a strange sort of mental hoop to jump through to convince yourself it's worth it. So what's happening in the greater Seattle area, you've got Seattle is in King County, and Pierce County is south of Seattle. That's the county that I live in. And a lot of people migrated out of Seattle during the health crisis in 2020 and have been for years now. And they have repopulated into Pierce County. And that has pushed home prices up here in Pierce County as well. Now, the rent is a little bit more affordable relatively compared to the Seattle market, but yet and still, even in Pierce County, rent is squeezing people on both sides. Here's a situation here. A software engineer, he could make a mortgage work, but he doesn't think it makes sense to lock himself into a $5,000 a month payment. That's a lot of rent. You can rent a decent house or a big apartment for quite a bit less than that right now. And also what's happening as rent starts to slowly come down in the Seattle area, for those of you who are investors, that's going to squeeze that cap rate, right? Because you won't be able to cash flow it as much. And if you are dealing with investment property where the rental market is starting to contract at the same time, the housing price in that area is also declining. That's a recipe for disaster as it relates to your cap rate, which obviously has an impact on the overall value of your investment property. So here's another story here. This lady says when she moved into her first Seattle studio apartment in 2013, her rent was $1,200. By the time she left her studio apartment, the landlord was trying to raise her rent from $1,800 to $2,200. The mortgage payments for her South Seattle home are about $2,500 a month, but she reasoned that owning is an investment that will pay back eventually. I'm not going to touch on this too much. There is a compelling argument for whether or not a home is traditionally an asset or a liability. You kind of got to do the numbers. A lot of times the numbers can be misleading. There's a lot of people from the housing standpoint are really getting hit with some very, very significant increases in property taxes, homeowners insurance that they did not anticipate when they bought their home. Not only in Seattle, but just nationwide. And then this person goes on to say here, the only reason I considered home ownership is because I was incredibly destabilized by ludicrous rent increases. Okay, just crazy rent increases. I happen to be in a good position at my job, making good money for a non-profit. So everybody's going to have a unique situation. You're going to have to kind of try to figure out what works best for you. The more scarce housing is, the more power landlords have over tenants. This guy named Jones says, when there's nowhere else to move, landlords can charge higher rents and they can keep their housing substandard in ways that might not if tenants had more options to say, I'm going to move elsewhere. What they do. So I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think by and large, landlords want to do the right thing. It behooves you as a landlord if you have a situation where if you got a good fixed rate on your investment property and the prevailing market rent is up here, and if you could bring it down a little bit more than or a little bit below the market rate, not only will you get a stable tenant, but you'll probably get a tenant that will appreciate that and get some longevity out of it as well. So once again, like I said, I think this is going to be a very, very serious problem that's not going to fix itself anytime soon. I think this theme of being a nation of renters is something that's going to be here for a very, very long time. Once again, I am in the early stages of putting some things together for 2023 and beyond for those who are interested in creative financing to be able to own a home without dealing with high interest rates and not dealing with traditional bank financing and not having to come up with a hefty down payment. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up with this video. I hope you liked it. Once again, I'm going to end the video with my motto. keep your credit score up and your debt down. This was the Kevin Strong Show, and I'll see you guys in the next video.